Coming up next from the Grassy Knoll, a terrifying look into the Orwellian world of brainwashing, disinformation, and ultimately control over you.
Welcome again to another segment of the Grassy Knoll. We are recording this on October, help me out there, Andrew, what is it, the 3rd? Yeah, it's the 3rd. That's okay, you're as bad as I am. We're recording this on October 3rd. We have with us, as you might have guessed, Andrew Colvin, and of course by the time you hear this, you will have seen that he is up in the upcoming shows. Andrew Colvin, the documentary filmmaker, the film, The Mothman's Photographer. And, Andrew, are we to a point now where we got a book? Where did we leave that last time we spoke?
Oh, boy. Gee, I know people are getting tired of hearing about that book, but, well, hopefully not. But, it's another interesting little thing that occurred.
Oh, boy.
Found that even though we had laid out a grid that was an exact size on every page, this is a very standardized thing. It's going to be very easy for people to take in. And you drop the images in, and the images are all the same size, roughly. The computer, the program, interpolates it a little bit in either direction to make it fit exactly into that size.
Are we talking about like the size of the page, a gallery page, or something like that?
Yeah, the size, the placement of images on the page.
Mm-hmm.
You set the image size, and it drops the pictures in and adjusts them slightly to make it fit. And that's what the program does.
Okay.
And that's why it's so good to use if it were to work. Now, in the case of everything, and I have a weird effect on electrical things all the time. Things are always happening like this. But in this case, it didn't do that. They're all slightly different. And this is totally, there's almost no explanation. I mean, I don't know that there is one, but so now we're having to go back in and slightly adjust the size of all of them, or the ones that are out. Some of them are out, some of them aren't. So
is this a
very painstaking process? So due to another, I'm sure, Microsoft-related glitch, we're having to do more work. So, but I do think it's going to be, like I said all along, we're on contract to have it done by the end of the year, so it will be out by the holidays, I'm sure.
Good. Is this a heavy pictorial book?
Yeah, photography.
Okay.
I'm very happy with it. I think it's going to speak to the Mothman issue better than a lot of other things, a lot of other ways of doing things. And I'm just finishing up Levinda's trilogy, and he talks about, at the very end, summing it up with the experiences of artists as being the bellwethers of this phenomenon. Because that's where it tends to manifest the most. And then in the works of these artists, you find a pretty clear layout of the phenomenon. So I really think, when I look at it, and I've shown it to a couple of my witnesses from the documentary, and they were deeply affected by it. So, these images speak on a deeper level, and it's really kind of the universal language, even more so than film, because usually with film you have sound, and then you have to have the overdubs if you're translating it to a different language. But with photography, you can just have the image and nothing else going on. And, they're limited to a degree, but at the same time they can speak even more strongly about certain things. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy with it.
Are you doing black and white and color in that book?
Yes, we've broken all the rules ever known to photography. And
that's a good sign.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted standardized sizes. because there's so much variation in other ways. So, but it all does work really well. And you and I were talking yesterday about what we're going to do today, and my idea here is to I've got this goal of getting through these little items that I just jot down all the time, and they're sort of all mashed onto one page, or into 2 or 3 pages, and actually more now. But I wanted to get back to that, and page 2 that we had not covered has about 50 items on it. And what I was thinking was that I could just read through, do maybe 15 at a time or something, and there's actually maybe 60, but do 15 at a time or so, and then if you hear one that you're interested in, we'll jot down the number, and then we'll go back to them and try to do a real short wrap-up, or go back to some of them, and try to get through all these in one shot.
Okay.
Would you like to do that?
I'm game.
I thought it's an entertainment device, so it would be a little more entertaining. I would do a little skit, because you just said that you had come back from getting milk, was it?
No, I don't drink milk.
Okay.
No, I can honestly say I went to the vegetable stand. So.
Okay, vegetable stand. So I'll pretend I'm mowing my lawn, or I've got the air blower. Here's the air blower. Hear that? Okay. And then, okay, let's just do it. Here's the air. Why, hi, Viz. How are you? Let me preface this by sort of if we lived in a world where people talked, where everything was 180 degrees and conspiracy talk was normal, it would kind of go like this. Why, hi, Viz. How are you today?
Hey, Andrew. How are you?
Hey, have you heard about in Maya, the city of Copan in Mayan territory? They have a temple there that has a god on it, issuing from the mouth of a bird, with 2 snakes above it, and so it looks just like the Garuda.
Oh, that can't be a coincidence.
And it was covered up by another temple later after their contact with the Vatican Church.
Okay. I'll let you keep going.
Well, that's the kind of things we could do with this to make it a little more entertaining. But that is a true thing. I saw that on a documentary. A teacher of mine, Linda Sheely, was a Mayan expert who broke the Mayan code and was very influential in just sort of how I approach it.
And the Vatican deliberately just made it go away?
No, I can't say that. I just think that's sort of the progression you see that I've talked about before, is that as waves of religion come in, they sort of roll over the last one. Before that, I think there was once a Garuda religion, and it keeps manifesting. For instance, before I get started here, I talked to my sister, who just bought a house in Tornado, West Virginia. They're seeing the Virgin Mary sightings there, but the strange thing is that this is on her property too, and she's interpreting them as a woman in a bridal dress, or a girl in a bridal dress, and other people have seen this too. But if this was in a different part of the state, or in a Catholic community, people would say it was the Virgin Mary. So, there is this consistent sighting of a winged white angelic woman, and it just gets interpreted different ways.
How long has this been going on?
Well, I just found out. She just bought this house a few months ago, and I haven't heard much about the place. It's south of the Union Carbide plant, the valley there where we have all this strange stuff going on. So she's still very close to it. And the funny thing about the name of the town is that it's right out of the valley a couple of miles. So I imagine that I almost imagine it was named by saying, well, this is a place where a tornado could hit, because we're no longer where the Indian Mounds are.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right outside the limits.
Mm-hmm.
But she talked to, I guess, to give you an idea of my oldest sister, she's had, all of these different things happen to her, from Black Panther sightings. So she saw the Mothman, she saw aliens, she saw UFO. She's even, now I guess she's seen a Virgin Mary, and she also saw a glowing being in her bedroom once. And she's had a dark demonic being that she's had an interaction with of some kind. And so she's got all this experience, and she walks up and she buys this house even though a whole family had been murdered there.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah, she's like, cool, that's no problem. And she walks in, she says no one ever bothers her, but that the neighbors come around and they just can't believe she's there, and they won't even come onto the property. They sort of yell at her from the road and they say, how's it going up there? Have you seen anything lately? And she'll say, oh, well, yeah, a friend came over and stayed the weekend, and he said the TV kept turning off and on all night or whatever. But I guess she said that a neighbor had come by and said that they had driven through this girl, this ghost, this Virgin Mary or whatever. They had driven through her, like it was a ghost. They had driven their car through it.
Mm-hmm. And
this guy's friend had seen he had seen a procession of people coming up out of the lake. There's a little pond there. It's like a procession of the damned coming up out of the water. And he would not come onto the property all these years later. He's just terrified of it, and he died a month ago.
How long has this house been vacant?
I don't know. She says there's all kinds of strange activity in the hills back there. There's like guys dressed in black driving what are those ATV things? And that there's been a sharp decline in regular people going in there. It's like they're doing something, there's some kind of strange behavior going on there.
Just out of curiosity, did she mention whether the ATVs? Never mind. You're talking about the four-wheelers, right?
Yeah.
Three-wheel. Okay. All right.
But yeah, that sort of relates to how the church is able to influence, interpretation of the phenomenon. You can find examples all over the place now, and you can find them in these ancient temples as well, even in other cultures. But if I were to start my list right now, I'd start at the top of the page, and I would just look at my notes here. Number 1, ESP affects emulsion on film. And the note was my sister channeling the image of the Garuda that appeared on the photo she took of me of the kitchen in 1973.
That's on the website, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
And that sister was born with a veil over her, like Madeline Bennett, who's the sister of Mothman witness Marcella Bennett.
The country folk call that a cowl, don't they?
They just call it a veil there.
Okay.
But, yeah, I'm sure there's other names for it. Number 2, passing out occurs in shamanism and also in the enlightenment experience. It's something that Puhark talked about, that both of these endeavors raise both of your adrenaline levels and your acetylcholine levels, which is unusual. It doesn't normally happen in a person. So a lot of times you pass out, and then as the person is recovering over the next few hours, islands are created in the brain where psychic links are much easier to be made with things going on outside of the telepathically or remote viewing or whatever. Number 3, the most commonly seen UFO are small orange balls. By far, the hardcore flying saucer is very rare, and I found this symbolism coming up in my artwork, and also with my interest in basketball, because I just always felt like there was something really interesting about the game and having this orange ball, and it's actually there is a symbolic connection of some kind to these intelligent lights or globes that people see. And number 4, John Keel in one of his talks talks about the person most likely to see a Bigfoot or a Mothman is a menstruating teacher of gifted children driving a Ford Galaxy back in the 60s. Because and he started looking into the reasons why. I found that it had to do with it's sometimes Catholic. If you've been formerly a Catholic, that increased it as well. But most of the time, it had to do with infrared sources of light. That these creatures tend to manifest around infrared sources, such as engines. Like in the Ford Galaxy, it had it was the hottest running engine. So that would explain why most, like for instance, there was one sighting where a Bigfoot was banging on cars, like down a street, and it banged on certain cars. And they kind of looked at why did he bang at this one, and found out that it had to do with the heat signatures. I guess even after the car's off, it's still emanating
right.
signature.
Sure.
He also mentioned these purple lights that lived in sections of woods, and I interviewed a witness myself who encountered some strange glob of light in a forest when he was young, and he was from Baltimore, had some mob connections of some kind, and then he ended up with some what do you call it, immune disorders later in life. So these lights are often kind of dangerous, and the farmers will tell you in West Virginia, if the hillside lit up with these purple lights, it's like the purple light is a glow that's kind of like a constant glow that just arises, whereas the orange balls are, individual balls. But the farmers are very wary of these things to stay away from them. Number 5, the brainwave expert working for David Lynch on David Lynch's new tour where he kind of goes around and talks about meditation, mentioned the Wizard of Oz. He used the Wizard of Oz motif in the stage presentation, which I found was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6, Linda Sheely, the Mayan expert that I mentioned earlier, was from southern Ohio. And there's the Serpent Mound, which would be near where she lives, is considered by many people to be a Mayan mound. And there's just this connection between the southern countries and these areas where you have a lot of the old mounds and things. And I know this from studying with Terrence Greider at UT Austin. He was very much a proponent of the theory that everything moved from South America up to North America, and not the other way around. And so back then, his ideas were quite considered heretical, but it's actually now really almost totally accepted. So that's one place you could look for trying to get answers to what's going on with all these mounds. Lavinda thinks, there's definitely a connection. And I think that they do it because it's a way to bring the Earth energies up above the surface and have them able to go horizontally into, I think it makes it easier for matter to ascend into spirit and for spirit to descend into matter. But I don't think it would happen instantaneously. I don't think you could just go out and make a mound and have it work. But if the mound was there long enough, it would interface, with the earth beneath it and start to create like a nerve pathway. Like, you can create new nerves in your brain, neural pathways by meditating. And I think the same thing can happen with a mound. They can bring deeper energies up, have them be more accessible to a ceremonial magic witch doctor or shaman or whoever knows how to tap into it.
And I'm to understand that those mounds all would contain bodies, right?
No.
They wouldn't. Okay.
And that's one of the strange oddities about them.
Okay, because I'm thinking burial mounds, but this is a different kind of mound then, isn't it?
Well, yeah, some of them aren't burial mounds. Some of them are.
Okay.
Some of them aren't. And it could be that the people that buried them, used them for burial mounds, didn't build all of the mound, or just stuck the bodies, placed the bodies in there later, and sometimes the mounds have additional layers on top that may have been put there for a different reason.
One quick question, because I know I'm supposed to hold them to the end, but just, we may never go back to this again. Is it your understanding anywhere that there is also somewhat of a pyramid network throughout the United States, not as obviously as pronounced as they are down in Mexico or in Africa? Have you come upon any of this, especially as it might apply to the Midwest?
Well, I visited those Illinois mounds that they're kind of pyramidal.
That's kind of what I was thinking of. Are there other ones too, Andrew? Do you know?
No. I mean, and I'm not, but I haven't looked into it. I'm sure that if you go back to like the 1800s, you can find a lot more stuff because it just all was mowed down.
Yep. Okay.
And like I say, Lavinda doesn't. I mean, he was really going after this point, and he could have added in this valley, the Kanawha Valley, as being, really the most gross example of just destroying them.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't go there for some reason. But maybe he didn't hear, the information by the time he'd finished working on it or something. But yeah, it's Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is built on a mound, the mounds that were torn down.
Okay.
And the military, has just gone in and they built prisons, like at Moundsville Prison in West Virginia. That was built on an old mound, in the right in the middle of these mounds. They just mow them down, flatten it out, and put these big facilities there. Probably because, no locals would do that, no private entities would want to do it, but the government being such a large system and just needing whatever's in some places wanting to put things in certain places for certain reasons, they chose to do that, and that's kind of odd.
Not when you know our government.
I mean, it could be just total stupidity, or it's something,
That's our government.
Deeper.
Oh, yeah, it could be some mojo, because some strange things happen at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, too.
Getting back to my list here, number 7, the Kanawha River is called the River of Death in the Indian. The translation of Kanawha River is River of Death. And my interpretation of that has always been that they were bringing bodies up as farther up the river as they could, and that's where Charleston was. And so that's where all the bodies were buried, and that's why they call it the River of Death. Although today it has a different meaning in the sense that it's very polluted. And you can't eat the fish. There's only one kind of fish, I think. You can't eat any of the bottom feeders there, and you're only, if you eat any other kind of fish, whatever that one is, you're only supposed to eat it once every month or something. So it's,
So your body can detox?
It's got a lot of, the big plant that burns as much toxic air pollution as the New York City is up the river. So, there's stuff from that going in the river. Where was I? Number 8. Greek letters were used to trigger contactees. That's according to John Keel. For instance, they'd see a Greek letter somewhere, either maybe inside of their UFO experience, there'd be a Greek letter. And he came to think that was a mind control or trigger. That didn't necessarily mean that it was governmental, but maybe some older occult kind of triggering mechanism. He said in number 9, Keel said the government was hypnotizing contactees, then sending them home. In other words, the person will have a contact experience, become known for that, would be hypnotized by the government to try to find out what happened, and just send them home without any explanation. He said it was really rampant in the 50s. Just a whole lot of these strange things where people had been, taken into some MK Ultra hospital, I guess, or some beds in normal hospitals. I guess they actually had beds set aside in certain wings of regular hospitals that they'd go off and do. A special doctor would come in and they would hypnotize. And I imagine this happened with my childhood friend who had seen Mothman and aliens and so forth, because he was under care and probably was hypnotized at some point. Number 10. Puharich and Henry Belk worked together doing psi work, PSI, or, remote viewing kind of stuff, ESP for NASA and the Air Force. And Belk, the Belk name is connected to the Rockefellers, because they have the Texas family. They have one of those big ranches down there, I think, where Dick Cheney shot the guy.
Okay.
There's kind of a Rockefeller connection to Puharich. Number 11.
Would that be B-E-L-K, Belk?
B-E-L-K, yeah.
Yeah, that's the name of some kind of, I guess, I don't really pay attention that much, but I guess I've been emblazoned somewhat without my knowing it. There's, that's a company down here. It's like I think a department store or something, Belk.
Yeah, well, that may be connected. Number 11, the Roosevelts are a Brazilian family originally, pals of the Rockefellers, and the Roosevelts didn't like my ancestor for playing Colvin The carbide investor who built the cloisters in New York sold it to John D. Rockefeller. So there's a connection between Union Carbide, an old, strong connection between carbide and Rockefeller.
And the cloisters, which are medieval. I've been there many times.
Yeah, it has. Is it a? What's the tradition there? Is that just straight Catholic or? So it was like, wasn't it more Gnostic?
Actually, we only knew it it would have like Shakespeare or medieval festivals and such. As far as the religious element, I'll be honest with you, I've been in there and stuff and never paid attention whether it was Gnostic, Orthodox, Catholic, or whatever. But it's a pretty cool place at the very north end of Manhattan.
Okay. Number 12, Keel asked police when he would go into a town, first thing he would say was, has there been any lightning victims lately? Because he found there are a lot of lightning victims around these Mothman or UFO or Bigfoot sightings. He said one time as he was asking the question, they brought a body in of a guy who had just been struck by lightning.
Oh, jeez.
So there's a connection with water and this phenomenon, because you have the thunderbird. It's a bird that flies when it's raining.
Mm-hmm.
It's scary. There's a lot of lightning. But it's a valuable thing kind of idea. We had we had three psychics in our town, or three transient kind of oddball guys, these street guys, which I kind of wonder if they didn't have attributes of these three shamans that people see in various visions all over the world throughout all time. There's always these a lot of people see three Indians. And one of these, here's the funny thing about the names of these three. These are like the three major street guys in Charleston: Lightning, Snowball, and Aqualung. They're all related to water.
And these are nicknames,
They're all
right?
related to storms or water.
Are these nicknames you're telling me?
These are nicknames. These are street names for these guys.
Okay.
Everybody knows them. You can ask anybody in Charleston who was Lightning, who was Snowball, who was Aqualung, and they will know who these guys are. And they all had strange gifts. Lightning had this ability to count building bricks, or he was a mathematical savant.
A savant, okay. Mm-hmm.
Do anything like that. He was Ripley's, believe it or not, level. He actually toured the country doing this stuff. And Snowball was a telepathic guy. He seemed to be. And Aqualung was like a crime fighter kind of guy. So if you combine the elements of all of them,
and superheroes,
you kind of have this like archetypal figure of some kind.
Maybe they were the three hobos in Dallas too. Oh, you never know.
And here, look at hydro quote. Okay, here's the hydro quote. It says here, Vancouver Island in 1968, a woman saw three men in black. One called, the other master. Also, they came the next day. Three more came the next day and told her that the first three were not hydro men, like they were. So there's a reference to water in a strange MIB experience. Who are the hydro men? Then it says here, West Virginia, 3 Indians were seen. And I don't remember the source for that. Also at Mount Misery, Long Island, which has this link to Henry Stimson, Secretary of War at the time.
Skull and Bones.
And Keel writes about him in one of his books about that place being haunted and having sort of paranormal things happen there.
He was a bonesman,
Linking the occult to the Pentagon, sort of.
What a surprise.
Another note on number 12, Japanese Garuda is called the Karura, K-A-R-U-R-A. It's kind of similar to Garuda. 13. Eastern Airlines, where David Ferry worked, was Rockefeller owned. 14. Atom bomb parts made in the TNT area. That's for John Keel, 1994. Basically said that they took over I found this somewhere else in Union Carbide history that they took over the Manhattan Project in mid-1943, which was right before the Philadelphia experiment. So Carbide took over the Manhattan Project. Mercury, Nevada, which was mentioned by Ferry and is related to Area 51, was the site of a 1981 nuclear accident. And 1981 was a year when we had a couple of well-known Mothman sightings. It was a very strange year all the way around. I made a note. Ferry must have got the U-235 from there. If Ferry was involved with shooting up people with cancerous substances, he might have needed to get atomic material, and that would explain why he was going to Mercury, Nevada. The term, and then another note, the term world bankers in the 1960s referred to the Rockefeller system, according to Emanuel Josephson. And the world bankers notes kept showing up throughout the Mothman saga. Keel would get notes on letterhead from the world bankers. These strange hoax letters, which I've always interpreted as someone trying to leak out the truth, but doing it in a hoaxy way.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
15. The Rockefellers started to invest in missile companies in the 60s. And also into Dow and Monsanto. 16. Keel, 1994, said he talked about a Mothman sighting where the guy had stared at the Mothman for 20 minutes. By the way, the smell, this is kind of related. They found that hydrogen sulfide? Where's that note? Hydrogen sulfide, I think it is, it makes mice go into trances. Just recently discovered that, although it's a really old idea. Whenever you see the devil, as Chavez said when he was on the podium, the smell of sulfur is still in the air.
Does that mean one should pass wind or something like that?
There's different ways. I don't know. There's different ways to become entranced. Keel talks about the blinking lights, which kind of related to your thing. There's the gas that people smell, and then there's just staring at this archetypal image. I think is very similar to the other ways. And I wrote, the cyplasma was entrancing the witness and displaying the Garuda for him. And while he was doing that, downloading information to or from the witness. And back to that missile thing, the James Earl Ray thing was related to the missile making a carbide. Do you remember that, where he got his alias from? Secret classified name that he found somehow. Name of an employee at Carbide making missiles. And then Ray claimed that the Rockefellers had screwed up his trial. Did you ever read his book?
No.
Tennessee Waltz. It's a great book just to learn from street level, what the game is all about. He's very knowledgeable, and just the harassment that he received all the time he was in prison is really an amazing book. But he ended up, blaming the Rockefellers somehow.
So James Earl Ray wrote a book about his experience.
Yeah, Tennessee Waltz. I'm sure it was totally
Tennessee Waltz. Okay, right.
Covered up in the media, but you can get it on eBay or Amazon.
And he used a pseudonym that happened to be the name of somebody that was working at the carbide plant.
Well, when he was on the run.
Okay.
Yeah, he used that name, and he always wore that plaid jacket. And the same jacket was seen on the Silver Bridge, being worn by some guys that were tinkering around with the bridge before it collapsed.
Yes.
17. Navy planes are now doing drug interdictions. Goes back to the World War II docs story put forth by Valentine. Douglas Valentine talked about how the Navy had infiltrated the unions during World War II, and just for their own purposes, various reasons, cheaper labor, but also to do like illegal. Because Valentine is also a drug historian as well as a crime and Vietnam historian. So he kind of tied it all together. That you see the Navy periodic times getting involved in drug interdiction. I think at that time during the war they were interfacing with the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which is now the DEA. So it's been this long relationship between the Navy and the drug agencies. 18. Tom Slick in Saipan Tom Slick's a CIA Bigfoot investigator. Today, many Germans work on Saipan, and they have harsh work laws. That was the news item I saw on TV. So that's kind of odd.
That's going on now?
Yeah. Today, you go there, it's all Germans, and there's very harsh work laws.
Well, they're Germans. You expect that.
Yeah, I guess. But you know, it's kind of the Nazi, and it just kind of flavor of a Nazi link to paranormal. Since Tom Slick had such a big presence there, he was basically running the CIA station out of Saipan on the oil company, amidst the oil storage facilities there. So they're actually using a petrochemical facility for the CIA base, and obviously had some links to Germany while doing that, because I'm pretty sure that they were there. You know, they've been there the whole time. I wouldn't assume that the Germans just recently got to Saipan, but I guess I'd have to study that more. 19, Barbara Bush and Crowley.
Yeah, this is a good one. Go ahead.
Well, you've heard of it. You heard that.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Barbara Bush's mother was somehow, she was from Ohio, by the way. The mother went to Europe at the same time Crowley was, and stayed in the same village as Crowley. And because she moved in high circles, there's some evidence that they knew each other. I can't remember what it was exactly.
Well, I think he knew her in the biblical sense. Let me say that.
Well, that's the rumor. Because Barbara was born, you know, a few months after she got back from the trip, and she does look like Aleister Crowley. I mean, if you look at the photos,
yeah, she's horrible looking.
She really looks like the guy. So. I just remember when they came out, it was so funny. And
well, let me clarify something you said, because you used a female pronoun and we're dealing with two of them. When Barbara Bush's mother came back, right, she had Barbara not long after.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, right. And
you can't make this stuff. Well, maybe you can, but that's great.
And the Crowley thing links to 1904 when he did his strange ritual that involved the children, precognitive children, and then that bridge collapsed in West Virginia on the same day that the other bridge collapsed, same day of the year, the Mothman Bridge.
Yeah, there was a bridge collapse in England.
What's that?
Did you say there was a bridge collapse in England?
Oh no, the bridge collapse was in West Virginia.
Right.
Year that Crowley that Horus, it was a Horus and Seth ritual, which relates to the imagery of the Garuda in my mind.
Okay, I got you.
Symbolically, and that was when that bridge collapsed in West Virginia, and then there were some visions associated with that spot later. It was considered to be a paranormal spot by everybody that lived there. Number 20. The Huff Shooter, Seattle guy who shot 7 people. Huff Shooter knew the Navy raver who he killed. There was a Navy one of the ravers killed. Do you remember this event?
No, I don't.
7 kids that were shot at a party in Seattle.
Oh.
Not too long ago. It was a block from one of our properties. I know the guy who owns the house. He was renting it to these people. He's just a community activist. He had been a community activist before, and it was kind of an area that had a lot of drug dealing. So we were always, going to community meetings and stuff. And in this guy's rental property, this horrible thing happens, and supposedly this guy was from Montana, and he just decided to kill everybody one day, and no real explanation. But one of the guys killed was Navy, and his name was Sushi, and he was considered to be Seattle's top raver, which I found to be interesting, because it just doesn't, in my mind, somebody who's in the Navy, somebody raving, don't necessarily go together. I mean, I can see where it could, but it just was a little odd to me. But maybe that's just me. The Kurt Cobain researcher named Lee here in Seattle, who goes on and on, he's been going on it for years. All these things stretching out from the Kurt Cobain murder or suicide. claimed the shooting was a scam to benefit the music industry.
Really?
Huh?
Really?
Yeah, and you know that there's the whole Operation Chaos connection to the music industry. So Chaos was, if it's true that Chaos was operating in West Virginia at the time of the Mothman, they linked to the music to some of the deaths of these various music figures who, you know, like Jimi Hendrix and so forth, who by the way, I own. The house he grew up in is right next door to the property. It's a block away from the murder scene. I just realized that.
Hendrix's home site?
Where he grew up is 1 block from the murder scene.
Purple haze.
So that's kind of strange. And this shooter Huff was known to have shot with a shotgun a moose sculpture in, I think it was Billings or Butte or Missoula.
They all look alike.
He was like an art hater or something kind of guy. And I actually have a shot in my book of a moose statue that I took. It's just one of the weird little things. You can look in my photos, you can see these little pieces of things that might involve mind control or might involve ops or things that have come up later after I've taken them. But this Huff guy, let's see, his best friend had committed suicide too previously, and had been under the care, been on Ritalin, or and not that there's anything necessarily wrong with Ritalin, but I think that once you get into that arena where you have psychiatrists working on kids, and that you definitely open yourself up to some abuse, especially if they tell you to go to Wing 4 of the hospital where the secret MK Ultra beds are, and then you end up going down the wrong path and getting perhaps caught in one of these strange loops, mind control loops. Kind of a related thing to this Seattle stuff is that there's been some other strange killings here. There was one where a guy killed a whole family, supposedly because he got drunk, but he had no prior history with them or anything. Just kind of looped off, and then there was the guy recently who shot up the Jewish Center. Remember that story?
Oh, in California.
No, it was here.
There?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He killed like 6 people.
Yeah.
And that was, clearly, I mean, it's hard to say what his motivation was, but it's kind of odd that you never really hear much more about any of these guys. And especially with these recent school shootings, you're never going to hear the story behind these guys who did these shootings. But you do know that the timing of the shootings always seems to happen when they're negotiating some big bill in Congress, like the Senate torture bill, or in the case of the DC sniper, it was the Iraq War. There's always these killings that happen right as we are being forced to go along with a new piece of legislation that no one wants. No one wants this except a few people in Washington. And so they have to use these subliminal methods, I think, just to keep people, to get people to go along with it. And it kind of works because it's all subliminal. But these school shootings, the guy in the Bailey, Colorado one, the guy had he had no connection to any of the people, right? He just kind of decided to go there, which is right in the middle of the Martin Marietta crowd, right? I mean, it's the same as the Columbine. It's very close to Columbine, isn't it?
Well,
shooting in Colorado.
The
guy, it sounded kind of strange to me, like he was probably maybe an MK case gone awry.
You know what? I think we have to step back, and we'll find out. Well, we may not find out in time, but it's best looking at this stuff from a distance, I think, because even this character who shot the young girls in Pennsylvania, I don't know. I mean, you don't know if there's somebody who went psychotic on SSRIs, or they got taken off them. They could be Andrea Yates, only they're males, and they're more prone to kill others than themselves. You know what I mean?
Well, I think her case always seemed odd to me because there was a NASA connection through her husband who always seemed kind of odd.
Well,
a lot of these stories, Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of them are obviously just somebody gone awry, but I think it seems to me like at least half of them, especially the ones that come at key times, those are always like the John Mark Carr case. These people come forward, they're obviously under the influence of something.
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
And the timing is always preferential to Bush administration. It's just and even before that, before Bush, they would happen at key times, usually to take away some civil rights and some legislation.
Well, also,
some war.
It happens every so often where you find, I've heard this a few times, where a woman has, thrown her kids off a bridge in St. Paul into the Mississippi River, jumps in after them, and not to save them by any means, but has no criminal record. This time, the pharmaceutical companies have also a role to play in this. And in the case of Andrea Yates, she was tanked up, cut cold turkey, and sent home from a facility. And it was only days later that she committed the murders. And it was the same thing like with Hartman's wife, Phil Hartman's wife. They were gone. They didn't even know what they did. And I'm not making an excuse for it, Andrew. But the thing is, I truly believe in some of these cases they've gone psychotic and they have no idea. So, what's the story with this guy? You took a look at his shot. I mean, he looks like, something's not happening quite right there. But we'll see. Also, I just want to let you know too, I'm trying to get interviews with a woman who wrote a book in the UK over the Dunblane shootings, and also somebody out in Columbine who has supposedly some information about what took place out there, that there were more than 2 shooters and such. So, we'll see what happens about this. I really like to take a look into it because it's never made any sense to me, And like you said, they come in clusters and they want to blame it all on copycats.
Right.
That could be true, Andrew, and it could be MK and, Ultra. Who knows? But this isn't over yet for sure.
Yeah. Number 21, L. Ron Hubbard lived in Philadelphia, which we've talked about connections to West Virginia in the past. Some think he was the Ohio serial killer that was killing people around the time of the Mothman.
Hubbard?
They think Hubbard was. Hubbard's boat was called the Apollo, his secret boat. And Keel talks about being in communication with this strange entity called Apol, which is short, I think, for Apollo. And I almost wonder if Keel hasn't planted some codes in this story, for other to sort of say things without saying them.
Okay.
Or is that just a synchronicity? I don't know. What else? L. Ron wanted to create immaculate conception for Satan. That's according to his son, who gave an interview to Playboy. L. Ron Hubbard read Crowley, collected fetuses, and was interested in cancer cures like the Rockefellers. So that would, if you think about these fetuses being taken in various UFO scenarios, sort of like the cattle mutilations being related to possibly, or corresponding to Nelson Rockefeller's interest in creating the perfect steak. So you have these correspondences that are just, tantalizing between L. Ron and so many Scientologists have now been involved, and that links directly to Manson because Manson was a Scientologist. So there's all these sort of L. Ron Scientology links lurking in the back.
And Hubbard was a spook too, right? He was intelligence. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, I've got another note somewhere else here about him having KGB. Oh, here it is. Next one, 22. Hubbard got heat-seeking missile plans from military men that they audited. So here you have another link to missile defense. And these heat seekers were the same ones that Carbide was making. Hubbard got heat-seeking missile plans from military men they audited. In other words, somebody came to them wanting help for what, and that's like going into a guy with a chainsaw, going in to ask Hubbard to help you. But this military guy did, and what they would do when they audited them was they would get all the sexual things that they could on the person and then use that against them.
And a blackmail?
Their sexual habits and things. That was kind of how Hubbard did it, according to his son. He gave the plans to the Russians.
What a guy.
Hubbard did. Hubbard did. Hubbard got the plans from the military guy because they had the juice on him with the sexual stuff, right? And that's how he leveraged the information and sold to the Russians. Had KGB working in the London office of Hubbard's London office. So they had KGB agents working for Hubbard in London. It's another note with this. Engineering and research of the Army ran the paperclip, Operation Paperclip.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I think you had mentioned someone called in and said that the engineering section of the Army had an office in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, if you recall that. So Fort Thomas would be connected to Operation Paperclip because that's the part of the Army that dealt with Paperclip. 23, Lawrence Rockefeller, mind control, biggest mind control donor, private donor. And UFO report of the Rockefellers, famous UFO report, never mentions the Mothman or the UFO flap in West Virginia that accompanied Mothman, even though it's part of the largest UFO sighting flap ever. It's kind of an odd omission. The Rockefeller Commission comes out with a big report on UFOs, completely leaves Mothman out of it.
You don't mess with their state.
24, Bhopal worker sabotage. Bhopal was worker sabotage, and maybe the prophecy that people were seeing in the 60s about a chemical plant blowing up. So my theory is that some of these prophecies were way before they were supposed to happen. Like 9/11, which was 30-some years before. I think Bhopal could have been the same thing, because people were having dreams during Mothman in the 60s about this chemical explosion.
Well, say that again. Prophecies of 9/11 earlier than it happened?
Yeah, that was something that we covered like the first day. It's been quite a while.
Wow,
first,
yeah.
Talk that you and I had, interview.
Okay.
My friend had this vision of 911 and I saw it too for a second and it was just like freaked out by it.
Yes, I do remember that. Right, okay.
Yeah, it definitely happened. That was what led me to doing this whole project, because I knew that there was actually there was something to it. 25 rocket. The space shuttle that crashed over Texas was brought down next to Kleberg's on King Ranch, according to someone I interviewed. That's the same place that the Belks and the Dick Cheney shooting occur in a certain part of Texas that apparently they were all taken from. They were all Mexican before that, all these ranches, and then apparently the Pinkertons were brought in to eradicate the Mexican ranchers. Have you heard this story?
No.
Texas?
I mean...
that's the story, and I don't know much about it.
At what time did this take place? When about?
That's sometime. They all seem to be kind of Rockefeller related. The Klebergs are in the Pew Trust. You know, the Pew Trust.
Oh, yeah.
About on NPR is an old oil family from Texas connected to the Rockefellers.
Yeah, and the Pinkertons basically were muscle to try to get the Wildcat oil folk to come into the fold to the companies. I think if you look at the movie Oklahoma Crude, it kind of deals with that.
Yeah, there's a very, just some mean ass behavior.
To say the least.
Other companies linked to Rockefellers, Neiman Marcus, Trammell Crow, Texas Instruments, Sunoco. We had a Sunoco station right there at the end of Woodward Drive where Charlie Manson worked when he was a kid. 26, Demo Hassan. That was the name of Indrid Cold's sidekick. I studied what that probably meant, the name meant, because I had already kind of done that with Indrid Cold. I looked at Demo Hassan, and figured that it was probably Demos, Greek god of terror, I think. Is that right?
I thought it might have been Giros, but,
Terror.
Okay.
And then Hassan is a shortened version of assassin. So it means terror assassin. So we're using this prophetic name. Prophetic in the sense that terror would become linked with assassination later. At that time they were already doing the assassination teams, and then they've now brought terror into it too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just odd. It's a name game thing.
Yeah, but, we find out that there's a lot to the name game thing.
27. The death list, the Mothman death list, which I've talked about, it's sort of similar to the copycat theory, in that it's sort of a diversion, I think. It was started to be pushed really hard after you and I talked about the Rockefellers in the 5th interview segment.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed the same week they started pushing the death list again. 28. Ewan Cameron, the famous mind control doctor from Montreal, was a Nuremberg trial doctor. This would have brought him into contact with Judge Parker, who had contact with Charles Manson. Charles Manson connects to Woodward Drive.
Mm-hmm. Where the Sunoco station was.
What's that?
The Sunoco station was there, too.
Sunoco station. Yeah, that links in, too. 29. Swedish ambassador, 911 murder. I guess our Swedish ambassador was murdered around the time of 911. I really didn't get back to looking at that. Our ambassador to Sweden who got murdered?
I don't know. I got to check that out.
What's the Sweden connection to 911?
Okay.
Possible link to Mothman, at least just in terms of telepathic, whatever. And maybe even more than that. 30. The UFO hacker trial. Just no real notes about it. I just thought it was interesting that a guy claims that he broke into all these defense computers to find out about UFO research that they're hiding using dial-up modems. I mean, the whole story just sounded bogus.
Yeah.
I guess they've actually extradited the guy back here for trial from England. Is that true? Do you remember?
Nope, don't know.
What happened with that guy?
So it sounds like John Carr, though. Guy, you got a free ticket back to the States.
Yeah, it sounded like another terror, just another little terror exercise to make us all feel scared.
Right.
Yet it involved UFOs, so
Right.
I noted it because there are a lot that do seem to connect with the UFO world.
Now you're going to hit.
Donnie Darko, director, was called a terrorist. Huh.
This is number 30?
Yeah, 31.
All right, now you've got another 30 to go, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we at 1 hour? Do you want to?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, what I was going to propose is this. What I think would be interesting, since we've never really done anything like this before, let this stand as taking care of 30 of the 60. We'll do another one in the same vein. And then what I think would be good is that listeners, if something really more or less pricks their ears or something like that, let them go ahead and ask for some amplification on this so we could do a show like that. What do you think?
Okay.
Sound good to you?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would be a good idea because, I mean, you said an awful lot here. And what I'll do is if I get some emails in, we'll take the ones that are the most supported, that is, by the listeners, and maybe we can just go a little deeper into them. I mean, there's a lot of provocative stuff there, Andrew, and, you could do like 17,000 shows on this stuff. But I think that's what we could do, and if you don't mind. And also, once again, you haven't said anything about the website, so in the last minute or so you got, why don't you tell us about it and what people can find there, Andrew?
Well, it's andycolvin.com, and we've got the DVD series, a couple of versions of that, a shorter or a longer. We've got a 12-hour version or a 32-hour version. And we've got the soundtrack, and we've got the MP3, which has a lot of great stuff on it, and it pre-stages what's going to be in the trilogy of books, with all the different additional interviews, not just the ones that are in the Mothman Photographer, but also the ones that I've gotten from other places, like things that John Keel has said, extended quotes from various figures related to this whole thing. And that's on the MP3, which has a ton of stuff. I think it's like 50 hours or something of interviews and rare things and music. And it's going to be a good addendum to the photo book, because there's some entertainment-y things on it.
Okay, I tell you what, Andrew, if you would stay with me.
And Mothman Live. People
I'm sorry.
can go to Mothman Live on Yahoo. Not Mothman. Well, there's one that sounds very similar to it, but it's not plural. It's Mothman Live.
Okay.
And sign on because we need more input.
All right, mothmanlive.yahoo.com.
Yeah, that's one of the discussion lists there.
Okay.
That's one of the smaller ones.
All right.
Sort of at the end of the list.
All right, tell you what, if you do me this favor, hang with me, Andrew. I'm going to bid the audience goodbye, and I just want to catch up with you on a couple of things before you go. This has been the Grassy Knoll. Tomorrow we will have on Chris Knowles and a subject that probably Andrew would be interested in. He has written an extensive article called Lucifer Rising. And so we're going to do that tomorrow, and see you then.